Arthur Vance adjusted the knot of his tie, a gesture born more from habit than necessity. The air conditioning in the rental car was struggling, but it wasn't the heat that made him uncomfortable. It was Graceland. The sprawling, almost absurdly opulent mansion rose before him, a monument to excess and a constant reminder of everything Arthur had grown to despise about celebrity culture. He was a journalist, a good one, or at least he used to be. Somewhere along the line, the passion had drained out, replaced by a bitter, simmering cynicism. He'd seen too much, heard too many lies, and been disappointed by too many heroes. Now his job was to poke holes in myths, to expose the fragile humanity beneath the glittering surface. And today his target was the biggest myth of them all. Elvis Presley, the king. People called him. Arthur scoffed. A king of what? Of sequined jumpsuits and saccharine ballads. Of selling out his raw talent for Hollywood pop and Vegas glitz. Arthur had done his research. He knew the stories, the rumors, the carefully constructed public image. He was here to peel back the layers, to find the truth no matter how ugly. He'd promised his editor a no-holds-barred expose, and he intended to deliver. He parked the car and stepped out onto the sun-baked asphalt. Tourists milled about, eyes wide with reverence, snapping photos. Arthur just saw dollar signs and manufactured sentiment. He saw the gift shop, the themed cafes, the whole well-oiled machine designed to extract every last penny from the faithful. It made his teeth ache. A woman overly polite and beaming with an almost unnatural cheerfulness met him at the gate. She introduced herself as Sheila, Elvis's personal assistant, though Arthur suspected she was more of a gatekeeper, a buffer, designed to protect the fragile superstar from the prying eyes of the press. He was Arthur Vance, the truth-teller, the myth-buster, and he wore that badge of honor like a shield. Sheila led him through the grand gates, up the sweeping driveway, and into the mansion itself. The interior was a lot. Plush carpets, heavy drapes, velvet gold accents, and more mirrors than a funhouse. It was the kind of decor that screamed new money and no taste. A testament to a man who had more cash than sense, in Arthur's cynical view. He walked past the famous jungle room with its green shag carpet and Polynesian-style furniture. He saw the gleaming awards, the framed gold records, the endless parade of memorabilia. Each piece felt less like a genuine achievement and more like a prop in a carefully constructed stage play. "Mr. Presley will meet you in the music room," Sheila announced, pausing before a closed door. "He's just finishing up a call." Arthur nodded, already formulating his opening questions. He wouldn't start with the soft stuff. He'd go straight for the jugular. He'd ask about the drug rumors, the handlers, the money, the isolation. He'd cut through the fluff and expose the man beneath the legend, the man who had lost his way. He felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the hunter's instinct. This wasn't just an interview, it was a mission. A mission to remind the world that even kings were just men, flawed and fallible, especially when they built their kingdoms on the shaky ground of fleeting fame. Sheila knocked gently, then opened the door. "Mr. Presley, Mr. Vance is here." It was surprisingly intimate, filled with instruments, a grand piano, guitars resting on stands, a drum kit in the corner. The walls were lined with more records, but these looked like personal favorites, not just his own. A record player hummed softly in the background. And there he was, Elvis Presley, not in a jumpsuit, not under stage lights, but in a simple dark shirt and slacks. He stood by a window looking out into the Graceland grounds, his back to Arthur. He was taller than Arthur had expected and broader. There was a quiet stillness about him that was unsettling. He turned slowly. Arthur expected the famous grin, the practiced charm. Instead, he saw a gaze that was weary. His eyes, those famous blue eyes, held a depth that Arthur hadn't anticipated. It was a look that seemed to have seen too much, felt too much. "Mr. Vance," Elvis said, his voice a low drawl, deeper than it sounded on records, with a slight gravelly edge. It wasn't the booming showman's voice. "Thanks for coming all this way." Arthur felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Not respect, not admiration, but a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in his carefully constructed armor of cynicism. He pushed it down. This was just another act. They all had one. "Mr. Presley?" Arthur replied, his voice deliberately neutral, almost cold. "Let's get straight to it, shall we? My readers aren't interested in fluff. They want the truth." Elvis offered a faint, almost sad smile. "The truth, huh? That's a mighty big word. Mr. Vance." Arthur pulled out his notepad, his pen poised. He was ready for battle. Arthur sat in the plush armchair, his notepad open, his pen ready. Across from him, Elvis Presley settled onto his sofa, leaning back, his long legs stretched out. Casual pose felt a little too practiced to Arthur. A star, trying to seem normal. "So, Mr. Vance," Elvis began, his eyes fixed on Arthur's, "what truth are you looking for today?" Arthur didn't hesitate. "People say you've lost your edge, Mr. Presley, that you're a prisoner in your own kingdom, surrounded by hangers-on, living off past glories. They say you've become a caricature of yourself. Is that the truth?" Elvis didn't flinch. He didn't even react with anger or defensiveness, which surprised Arthur. Most celebrities, when hit with such bluntness, would either storm out or launch into a tirade. Elvis just sighed, a slow, quiet release of air. "People say a lot of things, Mr. Vance," Elvis said, his voice still that low, almost melodic drawl. "And sometimes they ain't entirely wrong. It's easy to get lost in all this." He gestured vaguely around the room around Graceland. The lights, the noise, the expectance. A Kaffir scribbled a note. Amidst the pressure, guarded but somewhat open, he hadn't expected this level of self-awareness. "So you admit you're tired?" Arthur pressed, trying to find a weakness. "A crack? Tired of the fame? Tired of the music?" Elvis shook his head slowly. "Never tired of the music, never. That's the one thing that keeps me going. The music is in my soul, always has been. It's the rest of it, the circus, as some folks call it, that gets weary." He paused, his gaze drifting to a framed photograph on a nearby shelf. A picture of his mother, a flicker of genuine sadness crossed his face. "This life ain't always what it looks like from the outside." Arthur leaned forward. "Then what is it, Mr. Presley? People see the millions, the fans, the adoration. They see the lavish lifestyle. They don't see the man who's weary. Why should they feel sympathy? The way folks expect you to be one thing and you're just trying to be yourself." Arthur scoffed. "Being yourself, you're Elvis Presley, the man who revolutionized music, then traded it for movie roles and Vegas shows. Is that being yourself, or being a brand?" Elvis's expression hardened slightly, but it wasn't anger. It was more like deep-seated disappointment. "That's a fair question, Mr. Vance, and it's one I ask myself sometimes. Sometimes you make choices you think are right. At the time you trust people. You try to keep folks happy, and sometimes you realize you've strayed a little from the path you set out on." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped. "But I tell you, beneath all the rhinestones and the spotlights, I'm still that boy from Tupelo who just wanted to sing. That ain't ever changed." Arthur found himself momentarily at a loss. He'd expected bluster, evasiveness, a polished performance. Instead, Elvis was speaking with a quiet honesty that was disarming. It wasn't the kind of raw emotional outburst he could easily twist for a headline. It was thoughtful. "So you regret some of your choices?" Arthur probed, trying to regain control of the narrative. Elvis nodded slowly. "Everyone has regrets, Mr. Vance. If a man tells you he don't, he's lying. But I try not to dwell on 'em. I try to learn from 'em, and I try to remember the good things, the joy I see in people's faces when I sing. The way music can bring folks together. This room, this is where I feel most like myself. Just me, the guitar, and the music. No audience, no expectations, just the pure sound. Arthur glanced. After all these years, after all the adulation and the demands. More than ever, Elvis said, his voice soft but firm. It's what grounds me. It's where I can still be honest. It's like a conversation with God sometimes, or with my mama, or with anyone who needs to hear a little hope. Arthur wrote a few more notes, feeling a strange disconnect. He had come here to expose a fraud, to tear down a king, but Elvis wasn't acting like a fraud. He wasn't even acting like a king. He was acting like a man who was tired. Yes, but still deeply connected to something elemental, something that Arthur, in his cynical world, had forgotten how to recognize. He felt a flicker of something akin to confusion. This wasn't the story he'd come to write. Not yet, anyway. But a tiny seed of intrigue had been planted. Artists decided to change tactics. The direct assault wasn't yielding the kind of sensational dirt he was looking for. Elvis was too calm, too genuine. It was unnerving. He tried to find inconsistencies, contradictions. People talk about your spirituality, Mr. Presley, Arthur began, leaning back, trying to appear more relaxed. All the gospel music, the religious books, is that a sincere pursuit or just another facet of the public image? A way to keep the good boy persona alive? Elvis's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to darken, a flicker of something almost like hurt. My faith ain't for show, Mr. Vance. Never has been. It's the bedrock of who I am. My mama raised me right. Gospel music was the first music I ever truly loved, the first music that made my soul ache and sing at the same time. Picked up a well-worn leather-bound book from the coffee table, a Bible, Arthur noted, well thumbed. Elvis ran his thumb over the pages. This is what truly guides me more than any record deal, any movie script. When everything else feels like it's spinning out of control, this keeps me centered. Arthur wasn't convinced. You're also a rock and roll star, Mr. Presley. The pelvis, the man who shocked a generation. How do you reconcile the sacred with the profane? The gospel hymns with hound dog. Elvis actually chuckled, a low rumbling sound that surprised Arthur. It was a genuine laugh, not forced. It's all about connecting with something bigger than yourself. He looked at Arthur, a thoughtful expression on his face. And as for the pelvis, well, that was just a young man being excited, moving to the rhythm. Wasn't no sin in it, just joy. I never set out to be profane. I just set out to sing the way I felt it. Elvis wasn't defending himself. He was explaining himself, patiently, almost gently. It was like trying to argue with a calm river. What about the stories, Mr. Presley? The temper, the strange habits, the isolation? Is it true you rarely leave Graceland? Elvis leaned back again, looking out the window as if searching for something in the distance. A man needs his peace, Mr. Vance. And a man in my position, well, peace ain't always easy to find out there. Here at Graceland, it's my home. It's where I can just be Elvis, not the king. He turned back to Arthur, his gaze surprisingly direct. As for temper, I'm human. I make mistakes. I get frustrated. Just like anyone else, and sometimes when you're under a microscope, every single day, every little thing gets blown way out of proportion. It was a subtle jab, a polite reminder of Arthur's own profession. Arthur felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks. He usually delivered the jabs, not received them. You mentioned trust earlier, Arthur continued, shifting topics. Do you trust the people around you? Your manager, Colonel Parker, for instance. There are rumors he controls every aspect of your life, that he's taken advantage of you. Elvis was silent. For a moment, his jaw tightened. It was the first sign of genuine discomfort Arthur had seen. Colonel Parker. He's a complicated man. He's been with me a long time. He's done a lot for me, built this whole thing. He's family in a way. Even families have their disagreements, Mr. Vance. We work through them." He didn't defend Parker strongly, but he didn't condemn him either. It was a careful answer, a political one, Arthur noted. There was also a hint of weariness in his voice, as if the subject itself was heavy. "What do you do for fun here, Mr. Presley?" Arthur asked, trying a softer approach, hoping to catch him off guard. "When you're not working through disagreements or reading the Bible." Elvis's face softened. A genuine smile touched his lips, a fleeting glimpse of the charm that had captivated millions. "Oh, I still sing, always singing, sometimes with the fellas, sometimes just by myself. I play the piano, I watch movies, lots of them. I ride my horses, I spend time with my little girl. Lisa minds. Nothing compares to being a daddy." A warmth entered his eyes as he spoke of his daughter. It was a vulnerability that was strikingly authentic, a stark contrast to the carefully catered celebrity persona Arthur had expected. He saw a flash of the man, not the myth. And for a fleeting moment, Arthur, the cynical journalist, felt a strange, unbidden pang of something akin to humanity. He quickly scrawled a note. "Devoted father, rare, genuine emotion." Elvis wasn't a caricature. He was a complex, surprisingly open human being. And that was far more intriguing. Arthur found himself listening more intently now. Not just for contradictions, but for understanding. Elvis's quiet authenticity was slowly chipping away at his defenses. "You speak of your fans with such gratitude, Mr. Presley," Arthur ventured, thinking of the throngs outside the gates. "Do you truly feel that? Or is it part of the act? The humble country boy who never forgot where he came from." Elvis looked at him, his gaze steady. "Mr. Vance, if you ever doubt my gratitude for the fans, then you don't understand nothing about me. Those folks, they changed my life. They picked me up from poverty and put me on a stage. They believed in me when nobody else did. They're the reason I'm here. Every single one of them." He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate. "I remember being a kid dirt poor, sharing a bed with my mama and daddy in a 2-room shack. I remember my first guitar, saving up pennies to buy it. I remember being so nervous I could barely breathe before my first performances. And then the roar of the crowd, it was like something lit up inside me. It's about giving them something, a moment of joy, a release from their troubles. If I can do that for just one person, then it's all worth it." Arthur scribbled furiously. This was hard-boiled. He felt a faint blush of discomfort, prided himself on seeing through the facade. But Elvis wasn't putting on a facade, he was just being. "Have you ever felt like giving it all up?" Arthur asked, searching for a moment of weakness, a crack in the public image. "Just walking away from the music, the fame, Graceland." Elvis looked out the window again, his eyes distant. "More times than I can count, Mr. Vance. There's days when the weight feels too heavy, when you feel trapped in a golden cage, when you just want to be anonymous, to walk down the street and not be stared at." He turned back, a sad smile on his lips. "But then I remember the faces I meet who tell me my music makes them happy. I remember the folks who write me letters, telling me my songs helped them through a tough time. And I realize it ain't all about me. It's a gift, this music. And you don't just throw a gift away." Arthur clarified, trying to distill it into a tidy soundbite. "Ain't everything in life like that, Mr. Vance?" Elvis responded, his voice gentle. "The good comes with the bad, the sunshine with the rain. It's how you learn to dance in the rain that truly matters." Arthur found himself staring at Elvis. This wasn't the manufactured guru or the self-pitying star. This was a man speaking from experience, from a place of quiet wisdom. It wasn't profound philosophy, but it was honest. It resonated in a way Arthur hadn't expected. He thought of his own life, the relentless pursuit of truth that had stripped away all joy, leaving him jaded and alone. He'd seen the rain, all right, but he'd forgotten how to dance. "Do you ever get lonely, Mr. Presley?" Arthur asked the question, slipping out before he could filter it. It was a personal question, one he wouldn't usually ask. Elvis's eyes met his, and for a moment Arthur felt a direct, unguarded connection. Not many you can just talk to without them wanting something or judging you. He paused, then added, "It's the price of admission, I guess, for all the blessings. But sometimes it feels like a heavy price. Indeed." Arthur felt a strange lump in his throat. He, Arthur Vance, the man who prided himself on his detachment, felt a flicker of empathy for Elvis Presley, the king, the man he'd come to tear down. It was unnerving. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was becoming something else entirely. And for the first time in a long time, Arthur felt a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of genuine human connection. The cynic in him was on shaky ground. The air in the music room felt different now. Less like an interrogation chamber, more like a shared space. Arthur, instead of writing furiously, found himself simply listening, occasionally jotting down a key phrase, but mostly absorbing. "You said music is what grounds you," Arthur said, returning to a point from earlier. "Can you explain that, beyond just loving to sing?" Elvis nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. He rose from the sofa and walked over to a grand piano in the corner. His fingers, long and surprisingly delicate, grazed the keys. "It's hard to explain, Mr. Vance. It's like trying to explain what breathe air feels like. It's just essential." He sat down on the piano bench, flexing his fingers. "When I was a boy, poor as dirt, music was my escape. It was my comfort. We didn't have much, but we always had music. Gospel music in church, blues on the radio, country songs my daddy would hum. It all just spoke to my soul." He began to play softly at first, a simple, melancholic chord progression. It wasn't flashy or theatrical. It was raw, heartfelt. "When I sing, when I play, it's like a direct line to something true inside me. All the noise, all the expectations, all the burdens, they just fall away. It's just the sound and the feeling behind it." His voice, a rich, deep baritone, filled the room, not singing a full song, but humming a melody, then letting out a few lines of a gospel hymn. His face was devoid of strain, devoid of weariness. It was simply beautiful. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't the Elvis of the movies or the Vegas stage. This was the true artist, the core of the man. It was powerful, it was vulnerable, and it was utterly captivating. "That's beautiful, Mr. Presley," Arthur said, his voice softer than he intended. He was surprised to find his own throat tight. Elvis opened his eyes, a faint flush on his cheeks. He smiled shyly. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. I love it. It's the only thing that's ever made complete sense to me." He moved from the piano to a guitar, a well-worn acoustic, its wood gleaming softly. He strummed a bluesy riff, then a faster rockabilly rhythm, his fingers dancing effortlessly over the strings. He didn't sing, but the music spoke volumes. It was joyful, energetic, full of life, Elvis said, looking at Arthur, a genuine sparkle in his eyes. "It's all just different expressions of the same thing. Life, joy, sadness, hope. You can feel it all in the music." Arthur, who had always considered music a backdrop, a form of entertainment, was starting to see it differently. He saw the passion, the deep connection Elvis had to it. He saw how it nourished Elvis, how it kept him sane in a world designed to drive him mad. "Do you ever wish you could just go back to being that boy from Tupelo playing for nickels?" Arthur asked. Elvis nodded. Sometimes I dream of it. Just to be simple again, just to stand on a small stage and sing, and not have the whole world watching every move, not have folks critiquing every single thing I do." He sighed. then strummed another soft chord. But then I remember that those nickels, they turned into something that touched a lot of lives, and that's a powerful thing. He looked at Arthur, a quiet intensity in his gaze. It's a responsibility, Mr. Vance. When you're given a gift like this, you gotta use it. You gotta share it. Even when it takes its toll. Gorstom, to extend, to expose, to diminish. But Elvis, through his music and his quiet sincerity, was doing the opposite. He was expanding Arthur's understanding, opening his eyes to something he had deliberately closed himself off from. He was showing him the human cost, but also the profound beauty of a life dedicated to art. No matter how complicated, the music lingered in the air, a gentle echo of the king's true heart. And Arthur, the cynical journalist, realized he was listening to more than just an interview. He was listening to a soul. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something warm unfurl in his own chest. Something dangerously close to hope. The music had faded, but its warmth lingered in the room. Arthur found himself leaning back, no longer poised for attack, but simply present. He felt a shift within him, a softening of the hard edges he usually presented to the world. You mentioned the responsibility of your gift, Arthur said, his voice thoughtful, and the toll it takes. Can you elaborate on that, Mr. Presley? The weight of the crown, as some call it? Elvis picked up a guitar pick, idly turning it over in his fingers. It's like this, Mr. Vance. When you're a young man and you dream of fame, you only see the bright lights. You see the cheering crowds, the money, the beautiful girls. You don't see the price tag. He looked at Arthur, his gaze surprisingly direct. Price is you lose yourself, or at least parts of yourself, every song, every interview. You're expected to be Elvis Presley. Not just Elvis. And after a while you start to wonder who Elvis even is, without the lights and the cameras. Arthur asked, recognizing this sentiment. He often felt like he performed the role of cynical journalist himself, a shield against his own viabilities. Exactly, Elvis said, nodding. And they see a symbol, a legend. They don't see a man who just wants to sit down and have a regular conversation or play a game of pool or just be quiet for a spell. Everyone wants a piece of you, or they want something from you. It gets hard to know who's genuine, he sighed, a deep, weary sound. And then there's the constant judgment. Every mistake you make, every word you say. It's magnified 1,000 times. You try to do your best, but you're only human, and folks expect you to be something more than human. Arthur thought of his own articles, the ones that tore down public figures, dissecting their flaws for public consumption. He thought of the times he had judged without truly understanding, without seeing the human behind the headlines. He felt a sharp pang of discomfort. Do you ever feel trapped? Arthur asked, the word resonating with a feeling he himself sometimes experienced in his own life. A life that, despite its independence, often felt like a cage of his own making. Elvis nodded. It's a blessing, but it's also a burden that very few can understand. And your health, Arthur ventured, remembering some of the whispered rumors, the stories about exhaustion. About other things, Elvis's jaw tightens. This life, Mr. Vance, it's hard on a man. The travel, the late nights, the constant pressure to perform, to be on. Sometimes you need help to keep going. Sometimes you make choices you wouldn't make otherwise, water, and sometimes you slip, but I try. I always try. There was no self-pity in his voice, just a raw, unvarnished honesty. He wasn't making excuses, he was stating facts. He was acknowledging his struggles without losing his dignity. Arthur felt a grudging admiration, something he hadn't thought possible for a celebrity. He'd always seen their struggles as self-inflicted products of their own hubris. But Elvis was speaking of it with a humility that made Arthur reconsider. Do you ever regret this path, Mr. Presley? Arthur asked, a softer quality to his voice now. The fame, the whole 9 yards. Elvis was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window, his profile etched against the sunlight. "No," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. "I don't regret it. Not truly. Because through all the hardship, through all the loneliness, I've been given a chance to reach people, to make them smile, to make them feel something. And that, Mr. Vance, yes, but sometimes it's worth the wait." He turned back, a faint, almost wistful smile on his face. "You know, Mr. Vance, everyone's got their own crown to bear their own burdens. You too, I reckon. It ain't just kings, it's all of us." Arthur felt the weight of that statement. Elvis was looking at him, not just as a journalist, but as another human being, another soul carrying his own burdens. And for the first time, Arthur felt truly seen, not just as a professional, but as a man. The cynical wall he had built around himself began to tremble. The formal interview structure had completely dissolved. Arthur had forgotten about his meticulously prepared questions about the expose he was supposed to write. He was simply talking to Elvis Presley, the man in his music room. "You mentioned movies, Mr. Presley," Arthur said, the conversation drifting. "Are there any films you particularly enjoy outside of your own? What do you watch to unwind?" Elvis brightened, a genuine enthusiasm lighting up his face. "Oh, I love movies. All kinds westerns, especially John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. I love a good story where the good guy stands up for what's right," he chuckled. "And I like a good comedy, too, to lighten the mood. You ever seen Dr. Strangelove? That one's a wild ride." Arthur was surprised. He hadn't expected Elvis to name a Stanley Kubrick film. "Yes, I have," Arthur admitted, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's certainly unique." "Unique is right," Elvis laughed, a full, unrestrained sound. "Makes you think, don't it, about power, and folks getting too big for their britches." He paused, then looked at Arthur speculatively. "You seem like a man who thinks a lot, Mr. Vance. What kind of books do you read?" Arthur blinked. He was used to asking the questions, not answering them. I read mostly non-fiction history biographies, current events, things that give me insight into the way the world works." "So you like to understand things," Elvis mused, nodding. "Me too. I like to read about all kinds of things, religion, philosophy, even old war stories. I'm always looking for something to expand my mind, to help me understand people better, or to understand God's plan a little more clearly." He pointed to a bookshelf filled with books. Not just Bibles. Arthur saw titles on spirituality, martial arts, psychology. It was a diverse collection, far more substantial than he would have guessed. "You know," Elvis continued, his voice thoughtful, "I used to think that learning was all about school, about books. But I've learned that the most important lessons come from living at folks with an open heart, even when they ain't looking at you with one." He looked at Arthur, a gentle challenge in his eyes. "Sometimes, Mr. Vance, folks come at you with a lot of anger, a lot of judgment. They got their minds made up about you before they even shake your hand. But if you can look past that, if you can just see him as another person." Arthur felt the weight of those words. He had certainly come into this room with his mind made up, his judgments already etched, and Elvis, through his quiet patience and his genuine openness, was slowly, subtly dismantling them. "It's hard to do that sometimes," Arthur admitted, the confession slipping out, "to look past the preconceptions. Especially when you've seen a lot of the worst in people." Elvis nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "Oh, I know that feeling, Mr. Vance. Believe me, I've seen my share of snakes and vultures in this business. Folks who'd step on their own mama for $1. It makes you put up walls, don't it? Makes you trustless." "Cynicism," Elvis said, his voice quiet. "It's a heavy coat, ain't it? Keeps you warm, maybe, but it also keeps you from feeling the sunshine." He paused, then his eyes twinkled. but I reckon even the coldest coat can be shed if you're willing to try." Arthur felt a sudden, unexpected urge to confide in this man, this superstar he had come to expose. He wanted to tell him about the article that had gone wrong, the one that had led to a ruined reputation, the one that had cemented his bitterness. He wanted to tell him about the emptiness he felt, the constant need to find fault, but he held back. "Old habits died hard. What do you wish people understood about you, Mr. Presley?" Arthur asked instead, a question that now felt genuinely curious, not just a journalistic prompt. Elvis leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I guess I wish they understood that I'm just a man who loves his fang. That's it, all the rest. The fame, the money, the shows, it's just the stage. It ain't the story. The story is in the heart, and I try my best to live with a good heart." Arthur looked at Elvis, truly looked at him, and in that moment he didn't see the king of rock and roll. He saw a man, a complicated, flawed, but deeply sincere man. And Arthur Vance, the jaded journalist, felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in years, a genuine, unforced connection with another human being. The cynicism for now had receded, replaced by a profound sense of shared humanity. The interview, if it could still be called that, was winding down. The sunlight outside had softened, casting long shadows across the music room. Arthur's notepad lay almost forgotten on his lap. "Mr. Presley," Arthur began, his voice hesitant, unsure how to phrase the thought forming in his mind. "I came here expecting something else. I expected a performance, a carefully crafted image, and instead you've been surprisingly open, honest." Elvis offered a faint smile. "Well, Mr. Vance, I reckon there's no point in trying to be something you ain't, especially when someone's looking for the truth. Besides," he added, a twinkle in his eye, "I seem like a man who sees through a lot of things." Arthur felt a blush creep up his neck. Elvis wasn't mocking him. He was acknowledging his professional skill, but also subtly challenging his approach. "It's a habit," Arthur admitted. "Seeing through things. It started as a way to find the truth, but I think it became a way to avoid seeing the good." Elvis nodded slowly. "Sometimes when you look for dirt, that's all you find, and you miss the flowers growing right next to it." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "Life's full of beauty, Mr. Vance, if you're willing to look for it, even in the messy parts." He stood up, walking over to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds. "I ain't perfect, Mr. Vance. Nobody is. I've made mistakes, I've had my struggles, and I'll probably make more. But I try to learn, I try to be kind, I try to be great for the blessings I've been given." He turned back to Arthur, his expression earnest. "And I try to remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, so be kind. Always be kind." Arthur sat in silence, the words settling over him. "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, so be kind." It was a simple truth, yet it felt profound, revolutionary even to a man who had made a career out of being unkind, out of exposing battles, not understanding them. "It's a different perspective than I'm used to," Arthur confessed, his voice quiet. "It's just my perspective," Elvis said gently, "but maybe it's worth considering. Especially in your line of work. People are more than just stories, Mr. Vance. They're hearts and souls and dreams and fears." Arthur took it. Elvis's grip was firm, warm, genuine. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Presley," Arthur said, surprising himself with a sincerity in his voice. He hadn't expected to say that. He'd expected to leave, feeling triumphant, or at least confirmed in his cynicism. Instead, he felt softened, shaken in a good way. "My pleasure, Mr. Vance," Elvis replied, his eyes holding a look of quiet understanding. "I hope you find the truth you were looking for, and maybe you find a little more than that." Arthur gathered his things, his notepad feeling strangely light, his pen no longer a weapon. Sheila, the assistant, reappeared, her cheerful demeanor intact. "All done, Mr. Vance?" she asked. Arthur nodded, unable to articulate the depth of the experience. Yes, Sheila, all done. As he walked out of the music room, through the opulent halls of Graceland and back into the afternoon sunlight, Arthur felt a profound shift within him. The air felt clearer, the sounds sharper, the colors more vibrant. The cynicism, which had been a heavy blanket over his life for so long, had begun to lift. He replayed snippets of the conversation in his mind. Elvis talking about his mother, about gospel music, about the loneliness of fame, about the joy of connecting with fans, about kindness. He saw the genuine warmth in Elvis's eyes, the quiet strength, the surprising humility. He had come to Graceland to expose a hollow king. He was leaving, having met a profoundly human one. And in that meeting, Arthur Vance, the cynical journalist, had glimpsed something true, something beautiful, not just in Elvis, but in the possibility of seeing the world differently. The seed of change had been planted, and it felt like sunshine after a long, dark winter. Arthur drove away from Graceland, the mansion shrinking in his rearview mirror. The Memphis sun still beat down, but the heat no longer bothered him. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying every word, every gesture from the past few hours. He had come prepared for a battle of wits, for a game of cat and mouse. He had sharpened his questions like knives ready to dissect a king, but Elvis hadn't played the game. He had simply been himself, and that in itself had been the most disarming tactic of all. Arthur remembered Elvis's quiet sincerity when talking about his mother, the way his voice softened when he spoke of his daughter, Lisa Marie. He recalled the unexpected depth in his eyes when he discussed his faith and the pure, unadulterated passion that had shone through when he played the piano and sang Peace in the Valley. The melody echoed in Arthur's mind. He had dismissed Elvis Presley as a commercial product, a manufactured star, but the man in that music room was no product. He was a soul. A weary soul, perhaps, burdened by fame, but a soul undeniably connected to something profound and real. Arthur pulled into a quiet motel, far from the tourist traps, and checked in automatically. He sat on the edge of the bed, his laptop still in its case. He didn't want to write yet, he needed to process. He thought of Elvis's words. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So be kind. Always be kind. And cynicism. It's a heavy coat, ain't it? Keeps you warm, maybe, but it also keeps you from feeling the sunshine. Those words pricked at him. They were simple, almost folksy, yet they resonated with an uncomfortable truth. Arthur had worn that cynical coat for so long he had forgotten what the sunshine felt like. He had prided himself on his ability to strip away illusions, but in doing so he had stripped away his own capacity for empathy, for wonder. He remembered a time long ago when he had started as a journalist, full of idealism, eager to tell stories that mattered, to uncover truths that uplifted, not just condemned. What had happened to that young man? He had been bruised by disappointment, hardened by disillusionment, until all he saw were flaws, shadows, and hypocrisies. He felt a profound sense of regret, a pang of guilt. He had intended to write a scathing piece, to paint Elvis as a washed-up, out-of-touch relic. But how could he, after witnessing such raw honesty, such quiet grace? How could he betray the trust that Elvis had, perhaps naively, extended to him? He saw Elvis's tired eyes, the faint lines around them, the weight on his shoulders. He saw not a king, but a man carrying a heavy burden with a surprising amount of dignity. He saw the love for music, the deep faith, the unwavering devotion to his fans despite the personal cost. Arthur realized he hadn't just interviewed Elvis Presley. He had been interviewed himself, subtly, profoundly. Elvis hadn't challenged him with aggression, but with authenticity. He had disarmed Arthur's cynicism, not with argument, but with simply being. He thought of the article. His editor would expect blood, gossip, scandal. He'd want the truth, as Arthur usually delivered it. Messy, unflattering, sensational. But the truth Arthur had found was far more complex and far more beautiful. It wasn't the kind of truth that sold tabloids, but it was the kind of truth that changed a man. A wave of warmth spread through Arthur's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but a sense of hope, of possibility. The world suddenly seemed less bleak, less tainted. Perhaps there was still good to be found, even in the most unexpected places. Perhaps even he, Arthur Vance, could find it again. He took a deep breath. A fresh, clean breath that seemed to fill his lungs with something more than just air. He reached for his laptop. He knew the story he had to write now. It wouldn't be the story his editor expected. It would be something far more honest, far more meaningful. It would be a story about the man behind the crown and the quiet revelation he had offered to a cynical journalist. Arthur sat at his motel desk, the cursor blinking on the blank screen. He felt a different kind of pressure now. Not the pressure to expose, but the pressure to do justice to the truth he had found. He couldn't write the cynical piece he promised. It would be a lie, a betrayal of the quiet man who had opened his heart to him. He began to type, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. He didn't focus on the sensational, the rumors, or the carefully constructed myth. He focused on the man. He wrote about the music room, the soft light, the hum of the record player, described Elvis's weary eyes, his quiet dignity, his disarming honesty. He wrote about the profound love for gospel music, the raw passion when he spoke of his fans, the heartfelt admission of loneliness at the top. He even included the small personal moment of discussing movies and books. He wrote about Elvis's simple, profound statements. Never tired of the music. It's a conversation with God. The top of the mountain can be a mighty lonely place, and everyone he meets is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So be kind. He didn't shy away from the struggles. Elvis hinted at the heavy crown and the price of fame, but he framed them not as weaknesses to be exploited, but as burdens born with grace, as challenges that forged character. He showed the vulnerability, but also the enduring strength. When he finished, hours later, the sun had set and the room was cast in shadow. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The article was long, perhaps too long for his editor's taste, and certainly not what he had been assigned. It was respectful, empathetic, spiritual, and deeply human man. It was in its own way a love letter to authenticity. He knew there would be repercussions. His editor might be furious. He might even lose his job. But for the first time in years, Arthur didn't care. He had written the truth, the real truth, not just the one that fit his preconceived notions. And in doing so, he felt a profound sense of liberation. The next morning, he sent the article. Then, on a whim, he wrote a separate short letter. He addressed it to Elvis Presley, care of Graceland. "Attention, Sheila, Mr. Presley," he wrote. "Thank you, not just for your time, but for your honesty. You showed me a truth I had forgotten how to see, not just about you, but about people, and perhaps about myself. The cynicism I carried for so long feels a little lighter today. I wish you peace." He signed it, Arthur Vance, journalist. But as he wrote it, he felt less like just a journalist, and more like a man who was, for the first time in a long time, truly seeing the world with open eyes and an open heart. Days later, back in his sterile apartment, Arthur received an email. It was from his editor. The subject line was simply, "Vance, call me." Arthur braced himself, expecting a tirade. Instead, the call was a gruff voice boomed. "What was that? This isn't the hit piece I asked for. This is, well, it's something else." Arthur held his breath. "It's good, Vance," his editor continued, a hint of grudging respect in his tone. "Damned good. It's got heart. And it's got people talking. We're getting more letters about this piece than anything you've written in years. Letters about how it made them see Elvis differently, see themselves differently. Still," the editor warned, "don't expect to pull this stunt every time. But well done. Maybe you haven't lost your touch after all. Maybe you just found a new one." Arthur hung up the phone, a genuine smile spreading across his face. He looked out his window at the bustling city below, a place he usually viewed with disdain. Now he saw individual faces, heard snippets of laughter, noticed the vibrant colors of daily life. He thought of Elvis, the man in the music room quietly bearing his crown, sharing his wisdom. The cynical journalist had left Graceland, and a changed man had returned. Arthur Vance would never be the same. He would still seek the truth, but now he would seek it with kindness, with empathy, and with a renewed understanding that sometimes the most profound truths were found, not in tearing down, but in looking closely enough to see the light within. The sunshine, he realized, felt incredibly good,